If you are a parent in California and you're going through a custody case, depending on if you adhere to the state's own version of ideological indoctrination, that one factor may decide if you keep your children or not. Look at this clip of a California State Assembly member essentially expressing this new initiative being undertaken by legislators in California.
That parents affirm their children. They have since the dawn of time. Typically, it happens when their gender identity expression matches their biological gender. But what happens is when it doesn't, that's when the affirmation starts to wane. And that's what we're dealing with here. Although it's called the TGI bill, they're not mentioned anywhere in the law. What's mentioned in the law is the child's gender identity and expression and the parent's affirmation of that, whatever it is, because that is our duty as parents, to affirm our children.
You heard that right. Gender identity, or if the parent adheres to a child's gender identity expression, is now a factor in California child custody cases. Now, when this news broke, I mentioned on Twitter, and I got criticism for this, that this was actually an instance, a sort of expression of communism, and I'll explain what I mean in a second. What I meant particularly was the worldview that is presumed by attempting to have an ideological requirement for parents to maintain hold over their children. This worldview is most certainly communistic because it refuses to recognize the distinction between the community, between the government, and between the parents. This move, this initiative, some may call it political correctness, others may call it simple pandering, but I call it the logical consequence of a political culture which undermines and attacks parental rights, and by attacking parental rights, upholds the idea that the community, that the village, that the government are more important than the parents. There has been a lie that has been told for decades in America, and that lie is very simple. It takes a village to raise a parent. Now, this lie is downstream of philosophies that say that the individual themselves are not what matters in any given society, but what instead matters in a given society is how strong the community is. In other words, how strong the collective is. And so the individual is discounted at the behest of the collective. The individual parents are discounted at the behest of the whole society. So when it comes to matters that say, we as the government will set the standards by which you get to govern your children and their lives, not only do you see a complete and utter disregard for parental rights, you see an affirmation of that idea that the community matters more than the individual. The truth is this: the village does not own your kids. The state of California does not own your kids. The government does not own your kids. Parents have both a parental duty and a moral responsibility to shepherd the existence of their children throughout life until their children reach the age of majority. And at that point, when their children's faculties have ripened and they are able to understand the world a little bit better than they would have been when they were kids, they can then make decisions for their own lives that does not fall on the shoulders of the other parents. But until that point, it is the parents' indispensable and immovable role to provide for that kid. Think about, for example, CPS, because few folks are actually exploring the roots of this communistic nonsense we're seeing out of California. Think about CPS, Child Protective Services. The entire premise of Child Protective Services is that the government has a duty to intervene in the life of a child when their parents are being neglectful or harmful. It sounds right. In fact, in some cases, it may even be a feasible idea to affirm. But here's what is actually not talked about when that idea is affirmed. The face of that idea, that the government has a duty to protect kids from abusive households, seems all fine and dandy, and most people would agree with that. But the premise of that idea is that the government has the ability, in particular cases, to come in and disrupt parental rights. Now, when you take that idea to its logical conclusion, you see that it actually escapes the narrow confines of a situation where the child is in danger, and then the government gets to redefine and reinvent what it means for a child to actually be in danger. You see, here's how political power works, people. Political power does not simply work. by a law being passed and the government adhering to that law by the letter of the law. That's not what happens. Because those who make the laws and those who enforce the laws are two different entities. And in many cases, those who make the laws and those who enforce the laws are in bed with each other, so much so that they're actually the same exact entity. This is what the administrative state, also known as the deep state, is in Washington. Those that make the laws are actually in the pockets of bureaucrats that enforce the law and sometimes enforce the law in a manner that goes outside the letter of the law, therefore creating this permanent administrative state that makes congressional elections and presidential elections fundamentally inconsequential because they don't actually change the culture and change the mechanisms by which this new shadow government operates. Same kind of thing. So those who make the laws may have one intention, but those who enforce the laws and implement the laws every single day may have a different intention. And unless those who make the laws can correct those who enforce the laws and make sure that they are serving the original intention of those who make the laws, you have a runaway use of power that oftentimes leads to abuse and immoral situations. CPS, while it is meant in terms of who made the law to be a protective unit for children, has actually been weaponized politically in many cases and has been weaponized against parents as well in many cases, for sometimes parents having particular political beliefs or religious beliefs. Some parents don't want to take certain medicines for their kids, and there have been people that have tried to use that as a means of saying they're abusing their child by not giving them X amount of medicine that may violate their religious belief, so on and so forth. Since CPS is derivative of a structure of power, and those in power get to decide how the laws and rules are enforced, CPS can theoretically be used in any way those in power seek to have it used. Hence, when those who make the laws empower those who enforce the laws beyond what is necessary, i.e. in California, where they're trying to literally give extra authority to CPS to make an ideological assessment about a parent's beliefs as opposed to looking at the well-being of the child, we see this perverse union and this perverse effect that political power has on the pursuit of justice. Political power, while it has the ability to preserve justice, can also corrupt justice as well. Now, many people may say, Christian, the link to communism is not necessarily clear. Well, let me explain a little bit more. Under the communist mentality, there is no distinction between individual ownership and any other kind of ownership. In fact, under the communist system, there is no idea of individual ownership. The only thing that exists under the communist system is the ownership of the whole. What the whole has is what actually matters and what's actually consequential. There is no individual property. There is no individual money. It's all subsumed into this massive collective. And when you have this idea that it takes a village to raise a kid, the logical conclusion of that idea is that the kid cannot be raised by the parent, and therefore the responsibility to raise the kid goes beyond the parent, and therefore who governs the kid, who has ownership over the kid or governance over the kid, also goes beyond the parent, and therefore you can justify this kind of nonsense. We are dealing with the downstream effects of mentalities which seek to sacrifice the individual for some greater common good in those words. When in all reality, it serves neither the common good nor does it serve the individual. It actually goes against both. Because the common good, properly understood, is merely that which benefits the most amount of, actually benefits everybody, and that which benefits everybody is undoubtedly protecting their rights and treating them in a manner the government is meant to treat them, not specially treating certain parents according to different rules because they happen to disagree with the diktats of the state and the culture of the government at that point in time. The village does not own your kids. The government does not own your kids. Parents have an indispensable moral duty to shepherd their kids through the world. And the fact that we are seeing, just beyond this California case, we are seeing teachers in school tell kids, if you want to identify as a certain sexuality, or you want to express yourself in a certain way, I won't tell your parents. Furthers this idea that parents don't govern their children, or parents shouldn't be responsible for the well-being of their children, but in fact, people in the community who decide they want to de facto take the role of the parent should have that right instead. It is a complete usurpation of parental rights, and it's what happens when you embrace dangerous and toxic ideologies. My friends, California has made an ultimatum. They've made an ultimatum that I think few people should refuse to confront. In fact, everyone should confront this idea for what it is. It's a communistic idea which misunderstands moral relationships. It misunderstands the proper role of a teacher in a parent's life and in a kid's life. It misunderstands the proper role of a parent in a kid's life. And by confusing these roles, creates this upside-down world where things that are normally seen as defying common sense and reason are now seen as a logical conclusion of being benevolent. So much destruction and harm has been justified in the name of benevolence. So much destruction and harm has been justified in the name of helping somebody. And that is what we are seeing here with this move in California. Some may say, well, Christian, this doesn't actually affect kids at large, just kids who are in a custody case. Well, let me tell you something like this. It doesn't take very much to happen for a kid to be caught up in a custody case between their parents. It doesn't take too much to happen for CPS to take an interest in a child and to also initiate the processes where CPS would be empowered to actually take away the child or decide that child's fate. Just because they're doing it within the context of a parental custody case does not mean this is any less important than if they were just blanketly doing it to any parent in general who refused to endorse the ideology of gender ideology, which puts expression above reality and puts expression above reason and seeks to make people cater to their lowest passions as opposed to their highest being as a human being. It doesn't matter what the context is. The fact that you have this union between political power and forced ideological indoctrination, and that is being used to impact parental rights, that's the issue. And as Americans, all of us should stand up and say, enough. It is not okay. It is not sound. The village does not own your kids. You shepherd your kids. You have a duty towards your kids. And you reserve the exclusive right for that duty. And your ideological beliefs are of no concern to anybody but you and your own conscience. And the government of California should realize that, because not doing so is just setting itself up and its plans up for a very disastrous conclusion in the end. My friends, love all of you. If you love me, like this video, comment on this video, share this video, subscribe to this channel, donate to me on Patreon or PayPal if you want to help my mission get out there, or go to my locals, christianwatts.locals.com. Join the Discord and have some pensive conversation. I love you guys so much. Join the revolution of the mind, and please, 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 as always, stay pensive. I love all of you. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.